The mobile credential development is where we engage with Apple, right? The challenge there was really being able to align with Apple on how they wanted to approach doing the work. And they have very specific timelines. When we actually did real live with the universities, launching the capability with them, over 3 days, we did this launch. At the end of that week, one of the things that Apple mentioned to us or described to us, our approach and some of the decisions that we made around how we needed to do this, including the automation, enabled us to be the only partner at that point that during a launch didn't have some technical event that either caused the launch to be paused or interrupt it in some significant way. And technically it's a really big deal because we're talking about some really big companies that have done this with Apple. Let's say around payments, take your credit card from Chase and put it in the Apple wallet. They would have done very similar work to what we did. And they all had challenges, had to make some change on the fly. They all had issues. So I think that's the first place where we were like, hey, I think we met the bar that we were attempting to meet. If you used any Apple products, you'll know they make announcements at various points during the year. And when they do these partnerships, they also announce those at a very specific time of the year. When we started our work with Apple, it was in the summer timeframe of 2017. And we had to meet essentially a go live date of June of 2018. That's when they do their Worldwide Developer Conference. They make all these announcements. So along that path, there were places where they have these sort of go, no-go decisions related to how are you doing to get to that June date. So there was a tremendous amount of just sort of pressure to do brand new development. All this was what we call greenfield, meaning it didn't exist. We had to build it from scratch. And it was really the first time we were developing here, targeting very directly the cloud as the native platform. I think I've had the opportunity to lead a lot of really strong teams throughout my career. And when we put the team originally together for Mobile Credential, that team definitely one of the best, if not the best team I've ever had the opportunity to lead. They're just really strong, very dedicated, motivated, and understood sort of the path, right? They were very willing to kind of look at in the direction that we were headed and own it and be able to push it forward. And so you don't always get that, right? When we were working with Apple and we're going through these no-go decision points, the ultimate one was when you actually launched into production. We had to demonstrate certain capability for Apple to make the announcement at their developer conference that this technology, this feature is going to be available. So that experience was being able to meet those Apple demands and our internal demands to meet those schedules. We laid a foundation for how we do that work and then how we approach those challenges to be able to accommodate and actually meet the schedules that were in front of us. We established an all-day conference call with Apple, and then the customers were joining at doing their end of launching, right? Meaning people can now start to take the application, put it on their phone or put it on their watch and start to use it. So we got to production. Apple was able to basically say that was the last hurdle of a go, no go. They announced it at the Worldwide Developer Conference. And then we actually launched in October of that same year. So now over that window of the summer, we're essentially white glove with the universities that went first.
You're going to have the ability to add your student ID card to Wallet on your iPhone and Apple Watch. This works by simply holding your watch near a reader. Anywhere you can use your student ID cards on and off campus. You can get access to places like your dorm or the library or events on campus. You can even pay for things like snacks or laundry or dinners. And this works with your watch or your phone, and it will be available this fall, starting with these universities, and will expand to more campuses over time.
One of the things that you need to fundamentally do when you're targeting the cloud is you have to have what we call automation. You can think of it this way. Many years ago, you could go to Best Buy and you'd buy a CD and you'd go home to your computer and you'd put the CD in the computer and you would install some software, right? And it's local on your box. Think of that as on-premise, right? It's the same concept. Today, if you're using Microsoft Word or something, you probably go to a website and you use the app from a website because that is now sitting in the cloud. And so you're hitting the cloud version and you're not installing anything anymore, right? The technical difference is part of a challenge, but you have to have a way now to get that software into the cloud where you're delivering it, right? It's not on a CD any longer. And so that whole process is what we call automation. And you can either do automation and not make it a challenge for your development to actually accomplish that, or you can do it poorly, and it's a really big challenge. It's a time sink for the team or teams. We didn't have any of that sort of framework or technical approach in place. So we developed it, we built based on certain tools, needed to hit those dates I was referring to earlier. If we didn't have that automation in place, it would have been really difficult to hit those dates. Taking that pattern and applying it in other areas. Other projects that are greenfield, building for the cloud natively, are now adopting and adapting that same sort of approach so that on day one, they're able to start to develop and target the cloud in a way that makes sense. So in other words, when we started to expose this to other projects, much of what we did was applicable without having to rebuild things or recapitulate sort of the design. We were able to use what was initially developed to help stand them up in a way, and then add appropriate things specific to what they needed. This is a common pattern. Other cloud-based companies would be doing something in a similar way. If we didn't have that, there'd be a one-off development in all those areas. And it takes there's a special skill set there to do what typically you would refer to as DevOps. To be able to do that work and do it well can be super time consuming. One of the challenges when you go to the cloud more generically, whether it's our application space or other application spaces, is the ability to scale as demand is increasing, right? So the goal there is to try to achieve some automation scale along with your ability of the systems that you've built to have scale. So the idea of, if my demand is going like this, hopefully the systems that you've put into the cloud can adapt to that, right? We call that scale. And there are basically two different things you can do. You can do it manually, or you can do it in an automated way. Obviously, if you do it manually, it's a lot more error prone. It takes longer. It's not as resilient. You can break other things. So the fact that we were able to scale it, because that was part of the approach to make it scalable, was key. One of the things that we did to accommodate that is to enable what's called high availability. When we say availability, is it usable? Can somebody actually make use of the application? And there's lots of ways to measure, but being able to establish this high availability environment for the end user, for the customer, the benefit is they see no impact. If you have an issue with when things are happening in a normal operational way during the day, the high availability enables you to continue to work without the end user knowing that there's some issue going on. If you didn't have that scale, the impact would be obvious, right? The app would stop working or something would occur where the end user would be directly impacted. And so generally that high availability doesn't exist in the same way on the on-premise systems. And so that's one of the reasons you would want to move to the cloud, but you don't get it for free. You have to engineer the availability with your application, with your systems, so that capability exists. And that's a fundamental piece of other systems as we build. So the point of that scale is to enable the ability for your systems to be resilient in a way where the users don't really see that there's some impact occurring. So the term high availability really speaks to the reliability of your system. When you have an on-premise system, if the box stops working, the box stops working. And I think just generally in the software industry, you get a lot of tension around, I need it faster, I need it sooner, I need more features, and all those things drive impacts to quality or impacts to delivery. And I think we were able to take all of that and establish that. What we demonstrated was you can have a very aggressive timeline. You can have a need to produce a high quality product within that timeline. And if you apply the right engineering principles and you focus on those areas, you can have an outcome that delivers the real outcome that you need. You don't have to cut corners. You can do the things you need to do, approach it in a way that just seeing and learning from the process of standing up these schools on this technology. I think the real lesson learned, honestly, from where we started to where we are now, and some of the things that have been enabled by what UDX has done, is a couple of things. But really what we've done is we've built an internal product. They've built their platform, what we use for the automation, a product consumable by all of our teams that help drive that automation. They built it in a way to enable it to scale and adapt to all these various teams where they need to use it. They understood where we needed to go and it helped drive us there. And I think that's the uniqueness of what they bring, is that level, the skill set that they have and the broad ability for them to do this development work, which typically wouldn't what you would generally see from a traditional DevOps team. So I think what's interesting about UDX is they're really another development team. And I think that's maybe a subtlety that's a little bit lost. So the traditional, you can think of DevOps as another way to say sysadmin. It's not exactly the same exact thing, but traditionally the DevOps functions have come out of people who have spent a lot of time as quote unquote sysadmins, right? Keeping systems running, updating software, monitoring systems, those sorts of things. But where they haven't really been traditionally so much has been like coming from a pure software development background, like a software engineer, programmer, however you want to describe them. And so I think that the real value is that the skills that these guys have is pretty broad, and the ability to use them in this way and to really engage with the other development teams and partner on developing this automation directly with the development team and speak that same language. So when you think of what the work they're doing, what your other teams are doing, building quote unquote product, the DevOps team isn't really thought of as another development team, right?